Hello and welcome to our podcast series, Kuehne+Nagel's Inside Semiconductors and the Semiconductor Supply Chain. I'm your resident host, John Desmond, and in this series, I will be exploring the complex world of semiconductors and how this affects our everyday life and how we can manage the resilience within the supply chain. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Inside Semicon episode number 8. Today I have the great pleasure of welcoming Frank Bösenberg. Frank, hope I pronounced that correctly. My German isn't exactly where it should be. But welcome today very much to this episode. And it's obviously a great pleasure for me to have somebody like yourself from Silicon Saxony on. And I look forward to our discussion today, Frank. So maybe you could tell people who you are and what you do.
Yeah, hi, John. Thanks for having me. So I'm Frank, and as a managing director of Silicon Saxony, I had a network. We call ourselves actually a cluster organization. And in reality, we are something between SEMI, the big association, and economic development agency, a marketing agency for our region and the industry, and the club connecting our members for the sake of their growth.
Okay. And how did this thought process come about with you, Frank? What was the reason for forming Silicon Saxony? I mean, I know there's obviously a lot going on in the world with, different aspects, which we'll touch on later at the EU Chips Act. But what was the thought process behind starting Silicon Saxony?
The initial case was indeed a group of SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises that wanted to come together, collaborate, and get Infineon and AMD by that time as a client. So it started as a group of 20 companies, 20 members in 2000, and now we are more than 600 members.
Oh wow, that's a pretty big membership. I suppose that's specifically driven by the fact of the nearshoring. When you think about where we are and where we're going to in the next 3 to 4 years, that the amount of nearshoring that's happening has actually come on in leaps and bounds. On your opinion on the nearshoring, do you think that's something that is going to be progressively increased going forward over the years? What are your thoughts on the nearshoring with regard to like the Intels and the Foxcons and the TSMCs and etc. that are not so much Foxconn obviously, but obviously with the TSMC now called ESMC, it gets confusing with the names. What are your thoughts on those companies and how they're going to establish themselves within the Silicon region?
Yeah, maybe Foxconn is even about to come. I don't know.
But
there's one word I would bring in that it's resilience. Mm-hmm. So Germany and also Europe as a whole suffered quite a lot when there were not enough chips available in the 20s when COVID kicked in, and together with the further growth of the semiconductor market per se, this avoidance of this lack of chips is certainly a big driver. And nearshoring is one approach. Besides intensifying international collaboration, just making sure that you have enough chips for your own products all the time.
Yeah, that's the thing. And ourselves within Kuehne+Nagel, we've seen, a lot of companies coming to us as well, with questions on mainly resilience, and in terms of really, bouncing forward, what happens if, how do we maintain our supply chain? And because of the facts, as we now know through, media, through, my own podcast here, chips are involved in everything from the fridge to the microwave to the car to home security. It really is a weak point within the supply chain across. I've made a new word. Instead of it being a vertical, actually Semicon is actually across the horizontals. So I've called it a horizontal. So I'm going to try and trademark that word now, horizontal, just to try to get people more aware of the fact that we have something which cuts across every aspect of our lives. And because of this nearshoring and the fact that we also have the Chips Act as well, that's helping a lot, especially in the EU. The US, we're all aware of it, but within the EU, not a lot of people are aware of the EU Chips Act. But that has really proliferated the openness of companies to come into Europe, and especially in Germany. What are your thoughts there on the Chips Act, and B, on we've had some recent delays? So I suppose the first thing would be your opinion on the Chips Act. Is it a good thing? Will it bring, in your opinion, what it says it does in terms of jobs and infrastructure?
Yes and no. So of course we are in favor of the Chips Act, and in fact it's less than other regions do. And yes, it will have an effect, but will it have the intended effect of achieving 20% production capacity? No, certainly not. And why is that? Because for two reasons. First, the market is growing. And second, and I said this already, other regions are investing even more than the EU does. Nevertheless, we see a huge growth, in particular in our region with Infineon, further investing a tremendous 5 billion. And ESMC with a 10 billion project. And even the players that are here already, Bosch, X-Fab, and also Global Foundries, have either investments plans going or in the pocket, so to say.
Yeah, and I think one thing that a lot of people forget as well is the ecosystem that this creates. It's not just about, the jobs within the construction sector for, making the fabs. It's the engineering, and the operating of the fab itself. But then you have the whole spin-off, which is on the liquid side, the chemical side. You have the hotels, then you have the infrastructure, the road, the rail. It really has a spiraling effect when you have that kind of an industry, moving in. It doesn't just exist in its own system. I keep referring to it as an ecosystem. Everything feeds off everything else, and it just has this self-perpetuating way of creating jobs and security for people in the region, which is obviously something that's I suppose why Silicon Saxony has become so important in that region to help drive this forward. On that though, I've noticed, I've been reading articles about Intel delaying, because there was some items with regard to the location that they were, proposing to locate at. Have you had any update or the latest news on, I think it was 2026, if I'm not correct, when they think they will reopen? Or
yeah, officially the project is on ice for 2 years.
Oh, for 2 years. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the official statement, and then depending on whom you ask in the industry, the project will materialize or not. Personally, I always said as long as Pat Gelsinger, CEO of Intel, I still believe in the project. So now we have a different situation. We will have to see. I stay optimistic, but for sure we won't get any major updates before mid or end of next year.
Okay. And I think probably that's given the other companies a break. This is kind of a good segue into the fact of how we're going to actually provide the jobs. So obviously, with Intel being delayed, it does mean that the market from the terms of engineering and operators and general staff has kind of taken a bit of a breather, because now what you have the likes of ESMC now say still on track, and Infineon still on track. They're not all drawing from the same pool. So I think I covered this as well in one of the earlier podcasts we did, was that where are the people going to come from? I know that recently you've been, traveling a lot. I'm just wondering if you've seen or heard, from your perspective, if there was any way that people have found to find this talent. Is it going to be sourced locally? Will they, hire them in from, the US or Canada or Singapore or Asia? Because it seems to me that seems to be the Achilles heel, which nobody is talking about. Where do we get all these people from?
Yeah, it's indeed a challenge, and there's not one single source where you can rely on. We see India on the rise, for sure, with a lot of good STEM staff that can be attracted. But it won't be the single source. Really, we expect people from other regions of Germany, Europe, the US, Asia, you name it. The settlement of TSMC or ESMC indeed shed a light on our region, in particular for the Asian community. So we expect this. Yeah, we expect to see an increase from that part of the world. But again, there's no single source, and we face the same challenge as all major semiconductor regions, also in the US, of attracting the best people on a global scale. Will remain challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. And how to help those challenging items, how does Silicon Saxony itself actually provide this support? So if I was, a company setting up in your region, Semicon company, what could I expect from Silicon Saxony to assist me to streamline and to navigate the waters of Germany with its regulations, but also, the location? So how would Frank, help me to set up in Silicon Saxony?
Yeah, the good thing is, as we didn't start with semiconductors only last year or 10 years ago, in fact, semiconductors here for more than 60 years, there are always people that did what you're planning to do, for sure. And in some cases for many years already. So our job is really to bring people together, bring experience together, exchange for the sake of the region. So the common objective is to support first the industry, and second, the people or companies in the region, no matter where the headquarters are. And there are enough people that can help. You just have to find them, and this is where we support in finding the right people to help on those specific challenges, whether it's finding an English contract for your flat or someone that supports you in relocating or navigating through the jungle of paperwork that you still unfortunately need in Germany.
Understood. And I think that was one of the reasons as well that for us in Kuehne+Nagel that we wanted to be partner of your group, because obviously for us then having that interaction with the companies themselves, allowing us to interact, because we're also learning in this new industry. Semicon is not something that you can just say, you learn it and you turn the key and it's literally just, it's on. Because even now, if you compare to the automotive, you don't turn a key anymore, you push a button, and things are moving that fast. Eventually, it's going to be voice activated, then thumbprint activated. So with the silicon industry and the whole industry itself, you can see how it's very, very progressive, and you need to be keeping on top of the wave, so to speak. If you're not on top of the wave, you're really going to get crushed by the amount of the tsunami of information changes, regulations. And it's a very fast-paced industry, and not just because of the fact that we have a lot of silicon getting smaller and faster. I mean, AI is now exponentially growing the industry itself, but the fact that the equipment that's used to actually manufacture these chips is also changing on a yearly basis. And I suppose that's another area as well, which hasn't been touched on, is that, once the Intels or the ESMCs are up and running, the logistics of getting the large equipment in and out of these areas, is also a challenge. Do you have any, say with the local government, say to, enlarge the roads or maybe put some, extra facilities in place, parking spots for security? Is that something that Silicon Saxony is also involved with?
Yes, in fact, that became a major part of our activities, like, I don't know, 3 years ago, maybe. So when the EU Chips Act kicked in and our region that grew continuously over the last decade, so to say, really got another huge push. So we also started to push our regional, also national authorities in taking care of that growth that is about to come in the next months, years. And enlarging really the transport infrastructure, whether it's train, whether it's road. We need to enlarge on this just to master the growth that the greater region will see in the next 2, 5, 7 years.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of that. I mean, myself here, living now in the Netherlands, you do see that there's, and being Irish, I can make a very good comparison, which is there's 16 million people living in a quarter the size of Ireland. So you can see that the road infrastructure at the moment is straining, and you would wonder how would new industry as big as, the Intels, the ESMCs, the Foxcons, or the Wolfspeeds, how these guys would actually set up shop here. I think they've picked a good location in the Silicon region. Within Germany, you have access to the water, obviously, going down through Magdeburg. You have good access to airports, both north and south. So it isn't a miracle, or it isn't just placing a pin on the map for these people. It's obviously something that has to be thought through on many occasions, because not only I think do Silicon Saxony help them with this area, but also you have events, you've regular events, Frank. Could you maybe just give an example of some of these events that you do with the people in the industry?
Yes, so we have a lot of really dedicated small working groups, hosting people of, let's say, 20 people like that on dedicated topics on the value chain. And then we do major events where I wouldn't say maybe the entire ecosystem, but a large part of it, connect them 4 times a year minimum. The highlight for sure is our annual Silicon Saxony Day, taking part at the airport, 17th of June, mark the date for 2025, with close to 800 people. It's an international event by design for 5 years, and connecting really the people in the region, also with people from outside the region. And you mentioned that the industry is global, is one of our core activities, and that's where we also earn our living from.
Okay. So I think all in all, Frank, it was, a great talk having you on here today. It was very informative. We've covered a lot from, nearshoring to ecosystems, the transportation, to the logistics, to how, Kuehne+Nagel and yourself, that we've actually now partnered a lot. It's great to be part of the organization for Silicon Saxony. It obviously opens up a lot of avenues. It helps everybody to grow as well. So I think that's something that in general that, we can work towards. I'll definitely we'll be attending in June, the event itself. So I'll be there. I think you have something else before that, which I hope to get to as well. But if not, one of our representatives will head over. Any final thoughts, Frank, on Semiconductor before you go? Since you just come back from Asia?
Just as you mentioned, the complexity. We used to say semiconductor is not rocket science. It's more complex. And looking forward to cooperation also with Kuehne+Nagel on that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Frank. Okay, well, Frank, thank you. I bid you a farewell, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much, Frank.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast, Inside Semiconductors and the Semiconductor Supply Chain. If you found any of the topics we discussed interesting and you want to find out more, you can find me on LinkedIn at John Desmond or go to Kuehne+Nagel's website.